What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Creative Harmony Podcast. We are doing a new episode on embracing failure, which is something that I think we've kind of been dreading and looking forward to.
I don't know about you, but failure is my middle name.
Failure is constantly with us.
Yeah.
Every day we fail, all day, every day. Failed this morning, we'll fail tonight. Boom.
This podcast could be a complete failure.
It probably is.
No. I actually, this is honestly one of my favorite subjects. I understand why. Maybe it's because I like getting real and being emotionally raw and just naked in front of everybody. I'm fine with it. I think I've gotten more used to it, but I love this topic. I love this topic because it's so human. I feel like it's something that just levels the playing field. You know,
right.
Anytime you hear any creative
100%.
Of whatever caliber talk to you about their journey, it is just like littered with failure, in between all of
There's
the successes.
no overnight successes. There's none of that kind of stuff. It's always, I feel like failure is one of those things that I've always appreciated in concept. You always talk about it. Like, you got to fail. But like deep down inside, terrified to fail and handicapped by it.
Sure.
You know, and it's only in like kind of looking back over the last like 15 years and I'm like, or maybe 20 years, you're just like, dang, like so much was wasted because of not embracing failure. And I feel like it, you know, you and I both really know what that looks like now, what that feels like. You know, it's out of the conceptual phase and we just know like, okay, this is what failure feels like. It feels a lot like insecurity. It feels a lot like, what am I doing? As soon as you almost start thinking about what other people think and like, you know, what it looks like to see that through, like that's kind of embracing failure.
Interesting you say that because I think it could look different for different people. Like, I think that it could be like, okay, like it's the risk you take, right? So the fear lies in like the risk that you take. So you have to take risks. You have to take chances. You have to try new things. And I think of like a scientist testing something, right? So you could test something like electricity, like, you know, like imagine, you know, discovering electricity. How many times, right, did Benjamin Franklin have to fail before, you know?
Thomas Edison. Wait, no, that's the light bulb. No, we're mixing up our inventors.
Hey,
Thomas
A
Edison
for effort.
was the light bulb. Benjamin Franklin was the like harnessing electricity with the kite.
Sure.
We need to get our history right.
But anyways, I felt really confident when I said it before you said that. But no, truly think about it though, like testing something.
Confidence also helps as you run to failure.
Right. Everyone's like, yeah, Benjamin Franklin.
Definitely need a little bit of confidence, for sure.
Well, that's kind of the thing that like I'm really excited to talk about. But I feel like testing and taking risks and trying things over and over and over, fear is inevitable. Or failure is inevitable. Like failure.
Both, I think fear is also inevitable.
Sure, but I think that the more invincible you can get, the more if we can, within this short, limited podcast, within ourselves and try to convey and express like, how can we actually look forward to failing and how can we appreciate it and actually kind of like embrace failure in a way that like your parent would looking at you when you're trying to take your first step and you fall down. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, how can we be kind enough to ourselves like that to really be like, I'm okay with this. Like, I'm okay with falling flat on my face. It's fine.
Right.
Like, it's okay, you know.
Right.
I'm only 2 years old trying to take my first step, you know, or like this electricity that I'm about to discover is going to affect everybody on the earth. Like, it is going to actually be a huge blessing for the entire planet. Maybe I don't give up, you know.
I think that there's a thing about sometimes I feel like failure when you're doing something and you're embarking on this, whatever you're trying to accomplish, let's say writing a song or creating something new, there's that kind of that thing in the back of your mind where you're like, well, maybe it's almost like right when you start feeling that insecurity and you start thinking, well, is anyone going to care about this? Is this even electricity? Because if it's not, is it worth doing? And I think that starts getting in your mind, and then you get closer and further down the line, and then you realize like, wait, like if I start actually sharing this with people, are they going to even care? Like, what's the whole point? And so, I was thinking about, as you were talking, I was thinking there are two kind of like chambers of failure. There's the one that you kind of have this internal, conversation and dialogue before you even get to the like larger out exterior chamber of now bringing other people into it. And so I think the first thing you have to break out of is like your own chamber, like the first little section where you're just, it's like the gate, and there's that insecurity. There's that, is this going to even matter? Like, what's the impact of this? And you can kind of get so in your head. And I'm just talking from experience, like you get so in your head. I mean, starting from the perspective of music, you're 15 years old writing a song, and you have all these bands that you love, all these songs that you love. And I'm sure with you with hair,
people you really look up to.
And then you do your first song or your first thing, and then you hear it back and you're like, this is horrible.
This is not there.
And then you, like, the last thing you would ever do is share it. And I don't know about you, but I remember not sharing anything. And I wish I could go right back to that person, to that kid. I want to talk to my like 15-year-old self and just say like that, like you already should start sharing that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you almost familiarize and normalize that, like, I'm not going to share. And then, so you keep creating.
Interesting.
And you're just not sharing it. So you're not getting feedback. You're not going through those early steps of insecurity, which is kind of part of failure.
Totally.
100%. All in the mix of it.
100%.
And so, that perpetuated, I think, years to where I finally would share something with someone. And then you're like, but it has to be perfect enough or on the level of these people I look up to before you even share it.
Interesting.
And this is all before I was 17.
Yeah. I think when you struggle with something like perfectionism, for example, possibly, I think
guilty, 100% guilty.
Same, but I do. I relate on the level of like when you struggle with perfectionism, it's like failure feels like death. Like it's literally like, or something that's just not that good. Like you would rather have nothing there than be like it's not there yet, or it's not that good, or it's like, it's like, I don't know,
right.
Like your definition of failure,
Right.
I think that's like an interesting point, because when I had to start failing pretty early on, so doing hair, I was so young. Like the first haircut I ever did was when I was like 11 years old. And my whole thing was that I could have this misplaced kind of false confidence of just like, hey, like, yeah, I could do it. But then I'm also in my head, like, you're crazy. You're letting an 11-year-old cut your hair. So if it comes out bad,
right.
It's also on you, so I had this real advantage of just kind of being like, I'm doing it for free. You still want me to do it. I've given you all the disclaimers. Let's just experiment and see, and I think that built a confidence in me to just be like, I'll just try it. I'm just going to try it. And I just kept trying it. And also I think the advantage that I had that I did not know at the time was an advantage, was just that there's another person that it's so terrifying to like be doing your art on someone's head, and they're very emotionally attached to how it comes out.
Right.
And they're like looking at your every move while you're doing it. And like, you're just like, don't screw up. And so I had to face that in such a crazy way at such a young age, head after head of person, and just had only my confidence to kind of get me the next head of hair in front of me.
Right.
You know what I mean? My like, I could do it, even though I'm like, can I do it? Like, I don't even know if I can do it. I'm going into this really blind with no education. Obviously, I've gone to beauty school since then, or did an apprenticeship, and, the rest is history. But starting out, I had an advantage because I just failed early on. Like, there were so many things I look back where I'm like, that was not perfect.
Right.
But I learned so much and I got comfortable in the space of being in front of somebody and maybe it doesn't come out perfect and then moving on.
Right.
Like, I'm like, okay, that didn't come out perfect and I have two options, right?
Right.
Early on, like I was like, I have two options. I can give up. This is not for me. Or I can keep going. And if I keep dwelling on this, I know I'm going to end up giving up. If I keep dwelling on, because I'm such an empath and I'm like, oh my God, it's the worst thing ever to like screw up somebody's hair or whatever. But it's like, if I dwell on this one thing and I lose sleep and I bring it into the next day on the next head of hair and the next person and the next thing, like I'm going to give up. I'm going to burn out. I'm going to hate my career. So I have to take it. I have to learn from it. And I have to I would physically do a mental exercise of removing that memory from my brain and only sticking the information in my pocket. I'd be like, gone, information, check. I'm a better hairdresser now.
Right.
You know?
It's funny. I've done that in like certain things too. Like, I think that's this is a total little tangent, but just like visualizing something and then like throwing it away, like in your mind,
totally.
Like kind of wiping it clean is like a really important thing to learn early on, especially if you have like, some sort of like emotional pain or like bad memories or stuff, like being able to like capture that. But even like your words to yourself, like capture your words, your internal dialogue that's really negative and throwing it away. But there was something that you said that I wanted to point out, and that's like the freedom to experiment. That never really stuck out to me before. You said that you were kind of able to just experiment early on. And I think that is something that, and then like you kind of were experimenting, but you weren't experimenting in a vacuum. You're experimenting with instant feedback. And I think that is such an illuminating thing for me to realize. You were able to experiment. And then I was able to experiment with like music. I was just like trying stuff.
Totally.
But you were able to get that feedback because you were doing it already out with people.
Right.
And I think that in my situation, it's like, if you're not doing it out there in front of people, you're not
or with
getting,
the band,
you're not
even
get,
like you as a composer.
The band came a little later. But like, I'm thinking really early on because it's like the foundation. We're talking kind of about the foundations of our careers and our creativity and all that kind of stuff. I am noticing, because I've always wondered why there was kind of sort of a difference in how things progressed from that point. So like almost like I was creating in this vacuum without that like feedback from people. I was experimenting, but it wasn't with people. Yeah. And then you were able to experiment, but with that instant feedback. And like you're able to
by vacuum, like it's all just staying in one place.
It's like staying in my head, in my room. Okay. Like I'm experimenting, but like nothing's leaving my room.
Okay.
Like my own family's not hearing anything. God forbid. Like my parents heard me sing a song, and so that process I think took a little while longer because then I was able to, one step led to another where I'm finally like singing and finally doing this kind of thing. But I'm just trying to identify how important it is, like the steps towards like embracing failure.
Sure.
You kind of need to have courage to just do the thing, and I'm just kind of dissecting what you just said. You had the courage to do it. You're given the freedom to experiment. You're able to get instant feedback. And then with that feedback, you're kind of able to be like, okay, take what I learned, wipe clean the things that were like maybe the failures or whatever, and keep going.
Sure.
But you're able to do that kind of early on. And I just want to like kind of identify that, because I think that whoever's listening,
yes,
like that is a path towards embracing failure, which is inevitably the path to success and to, not failing, in the same way. Sure. It's like failing forward. That almost like that's how you fail forward. So you need to be able to have the freedom, the confidence, the courage to do the thing, but then you need to make sure that you're also in like letting other people in on that whole thing. What's your reaction to that? What do you think?
No, I just think that when you say failing forward, it's like it feels almost like a cliche now, but it's just there's so much truth in it. And that's why we always talk about failing faster, right? Like fail as quick as you can, as many times as you can. But that just means that you're doing more, because failure should almost become this place of just like so familiar. Like if you're so familiar with it because you're letting yourself have the freedom and the confidence to create regardless. You know what I mean? And you don't ruminate, you don't get hung up on things, you don't allow yourself that I don't know, just like to go down that like mental vortex that can suck you in, right?
Right.
You don't allow yourself to go there, and you really get to a place where failure becomes like an experimentation. Like you've got to think of yourself kind of like that scientist as a creative,
Right.
where you kind of need to be like, you can be close to your project. You can love your project so much. You can pour your passion and your heart into your project, and then you can let it go.
Yeah.
And then you can move
let it go
on.
But you have to let it go.
You have.
And
you
so I think the
cannot-
difference is a lot of people keep it. They keep their little baby, like,
Sure.
and they're like, I can't. This is my precious child of an idea or passion or whatever, and they just can't let it go.
But then the problem with that is that now that's all you've done.
Yeah.
Because if you don't let it go and you don't throw it into the world, you aren't free to do the next thing.
Right.
Because you haven't moved on.
Right.
You haven't moved on. And so I just feel like there's this really important like need to just be like, okay, like you take what you've learned, and then you force yourself. Like if you're in a position where you don't have like the next client coming in and you're not forced, you kind of have to force yourself to throw your art out there because it was for that time. Like that, I feel like sometimes inspiration is given to you, right? Like it's so many of the people that we admire the most and respect the most who are just at a different caliber. Like I think about, gosh, can you think of anybody who's like, it's literally being channeled through you almost? Like it's like you're getting downloads of either lyrics, or you're getting downloads of poetry, or you're getting just like you're in a zone. Like I think of my dad as a director being like in a zone and being like, okay, in the editing room and then over here and then cutting things together and the mixing, like when the final mix is getting done. And you're just kind of in a different planet for a minute, right? It's like if you can never enter into that space, or if you get something downloaded and you put it on paper, or you make something and then you don't release it because of that fear of failure, or you don't like put it out, or it just doesn't become anything, then like what was the purpose? Like I just feel like there is, and not to get like super spiritual about it, but a little bit, it's like that was a gift just for you.
Right.
Like, it's like you have no idea what that was for. You have no idea what that could have affected. You have no idea why you're gifted in the way that you are and what you actually hold in your hands. Because hair, like, is whatever. It's protein. It's made of keratin. It's like, grows on our heads. It's like kind of a vein thing, whatever. You can look at it all the negative ways of just like, oh, it's just hair. Or you could be like, for whatever reason, I was given this.
Right.
And it's in me to do this. And so if I don't, like, what a waste. Because look at what it's become.
Right. Right.
It's like a gift.
It is a gift.
It's not just for you. It's almost selfish if you're so terrified of failure that you don't share it.
Right. It's like keeping, it's like a little light that you're just keeping a basket over. You're not letting that light shine kind of,
let your little
situation.
Light shine.
It totally is. I mean, I think that there's so many like, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. All of those old songs that you listen to in Sunday school or whatever carry so much great weight. Like, I think that there's like this rudimentary foundational stuff that, that somehow you hear, and then it just goes one ear and out the other as you get older, because you don't know how to recognize when you're covering your light or you're covering that. And I think that's one thing that I wish I could go back and tell myself all of these things.
Yeah.
But there is a psychology to failing in public. There's a psychology to it. And what you do is you're everything we're saying is, okay, you have your idea, you have your passion, you have your whatever,
Yeah.
And then you keep it in your vacuum, or you keep it inside your, to yourself. You never share it. I mean, you have to develop in public. You have to develop with feedback. And if you're not getting feedback, you can't improve. And so in my case, it was when, you start playing with a band, or when I started film scoring, people would be like, this is a note. I don't like it. Can you try this? Okay, cool. And to a degree, like that really helped me grow as like a film composer. But I do think that like there's this other journey as just a holistic artist where there were so many ideas and so many songs and so many things that were just, I kept the basket over, and no one was telling me that you have to just put it out there and get that feedback. Yeah. And so today, ironically, this morning, I released this song that I had written a few months ago or years ago called, what was it called?
Dead Art.
Dead Art. And it's literally about this entire conversation. It's like so music that you...
and, we weren't even planning that.
We weren't even planning on...
For sure.
We didn't even know if we were going to do this podcast today. But it just so happened to come a few hours after literally going through this entire exercise. Yeah. And what I was implementing is everything I've learned. It's like, who cares? Okay, so there's a song called Dead Art, which is about music and art that you create.
Are you going to play it for us at the end?
Well, you can go on my Instagram and listen to it. But I guess we could repost it on Creative Harmonies podcast. But the song is about all these like great ideas that you have, and then you just, what's the point? Because it's dead art, because no one's going to hear it. It's not going to go out there. Okay. So that's kind of the motivation of that song. Enough time goes by, you get so frustrated. So I wrote a song about it. And then, but today, I just was like, I'm just going to throw it out there because who cares? Whatever. Who cares? At this point, I have so much conviction, and I've learned that it does have to take place on the public market, like on the street corner, on the whatever. So put it out there. Okay. And then the exciting thing about that was that like kind of like felt good. Like after I put it out, I was like, this is cool. Like it's out, whatever. A little bit of that fear of like what people are going to say or think, but then it's just like, who cares? Because that right there is like where I always stopped myself. Yeah. I was like, I care about what people think. And robbed. I mean, we've talked about this so many times. It's like literally care. And so embracing failure, it's so important to know that people are going to have their opinions, and who gives a shit. Yeah. Literally, who cares?
Yeah. I think too, like there's different types of failures, right? Like there's like the failure that is like a little bump in the road, and then there's like, oh, I lost my job because of this.
Okay, or so like, we should talk about that next because I think, this is conceptual art freedom. But there's also failure in business. So let's talk about that next. Business, it's a perfect segue.
Sure, business, but like even in your art, like say you just like try something new and it doesn't work, or whatever. Or for me, a loss of a client, or like you did one gig and then you were like, oh, like I blew it kind of a thing, And so there are those moments. And so I think it is this interesting kind of like holistic, because there's like mini failures. There's like the micro failures where you're like, oops, get back up. Okay, and then I kind of ease it over and we're good in the end, like where you can kind of learn to adapt, and you can learn to kind of flow with the failure in the moment and make magic happen, which is great, which is such a skill in itself. Right. And then there's the bigger picture of like, okay, maybe go home, take a nap and eat like a tub of ice cream, but then get up the next day on a holistic level and be like back to the drawing board. Like that's a huge lesson. Like some of those are the biggest life lessons and the biggest turning points. I've heard of so many people getting fired from their job and then going to like the thing that their dream of like what they always wanted to do, or whatever. Like you hear time and time again of those stories of just tragedy. Right. Like maybe just it feels like failure in life, and it maybe happened to you, and maybe it was someone around you had failed you, or you know what I mean? And those are the things that you have this opportunity to redefine and to remake yourself, your life, your career, and you have a story behind it.
Right.
And it becomes your greatest asset.
Right.
Failure can become your greatest launching point, or your, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
if you don't let it overcome you, and if you're able to really be like, I'll give myself a little time or a little something, and then be like, this is not going to define me.
Right. I think that's the key, because there's so many there's so many chapters to embracing failure. So there's like chapter 1, you're internal. Chapter 2, you start throwing it out there. You start getting feedback from people. And then let's say you make it to chapter 3, where now you kind of have like a career or something like that.
Yeah.
But then, okay, chapter 4 is actually like experiencing like a major failure. And then what do you do then? Do you just give up? Or are you like, this is way too much for me, I'm just going to like give in? And we know how that plays out for people. You see a lot of bitterness in people who like kind of gave in, like they kind of stopped. And
like
I can
had
see,
an injury,
I think we can
or
both see in our lives where there's times where we could have just like kind of threw in the towel and we're like, this is too much. And I'm so glad we've never done that, because here we are still kind of learning, but progressed in a lot of different ways. But yeah, it really matters how you respond to it. So I was going to ask you, I have a story of how I've really like a career failure that I have, but I'm curious if you have one on, that comes to mind for you.
You know what? I have had so many. I'm not joking. Like,
well, you get like color failures, and
oh
like
my
you
God,
get like
it's terrifying.
Customer service, like,
yes.
Oh my God. And people are coming at you hard.
There could even be failure in a sense of like, you don't think, I don't know, you did exactly what the client told you to do, and it's like still a failure because you hated your own work. You're like, well, I gave in and now I suck.
Right.
And I like, oh, and you're like uninspired by it. Like there's just been, I had like this metaphor kind of hit me when you were talking. It's like you're in an ocean and you've got these little waves just kind of like, oh, like, bumping you around, and you're kind of pummeled a little bit, or you're kind of knocked over, you get up, you're still fine, Right. And then all of a sudden there's like this huge crashing wave that pulls you under and pulls you out into the ocean and then spits you out, and you don't know which way is up and down. And now you're like in the deep, what I mean? And I would say, and I'm just going to be really honest, I think that emotionally I felt like giving up after we had the accident, because I had just had a baby, I had broken my back, and then I had a miscarriage because I got pregnant right after having a baby. And so that like was a year of, for me, like as a mom, and not even in my career, but just like, and then also just giving, like missing some of the biggest shows that I had planned for Spain and all the things. And I feel like we might have told this story on here before, so I won't go into details. But all of that, the compound effect of what happened that year for me was kind of just like, I'm okay just, giving up. And then I felt like the perspective shift, like I got thrown out into the deep, but it was like, okay, now I'm in the ocean though, and the waves aren't hitting me anymore. And I have this like newfound confidence and groundedness, and just like I can just swim, like it's like on the shore where all the waves are, and it's like I've been through all that. I don't care. Like if something gets messed up, I can fix it. I know how. I've done it a million times.
Right.
Like it doesn't scare me at all. Like I'm not scared to go into the ocean anymore, because I'm like, you know what? Like I know how to just let the wave take me in, and now I get to swim. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm in the deep, and it actually feels really great.
Right.
And so I feel like I'm like at a deeper, more grounded, like I can just go off and crush a show. And if there's bumps along the way, like learn from it, figure out how to communicate better and move on, I don't know. You feel a little more invincible after being like, I've failed the hardest, or was like willing to give up, and then come out of it.
Well, it's weird. That's probably not the right word. It's interesting to me that you're actually talking about a tragedy. So you're describing kind of the same thing. You're like, it started asking about failure, and then your failure is actually a tragedy. And so how similar those two are. And the way out of it is the same. It's resilience. So you have, whether it's failure and then for you, your hardest thing was having things like taken away from you,
or even just
and
feeling like
physical
failing
things.
as
You weren't
a
failing
mom or
because
in
the
my
funny thing is like
career.
you weren't failing at all. Like that's not a failure.
Yeah.
But you felt that way. It was just a tragedy, you know.
Sure.
Not just, but it was tragedy after tragedy, and so you were, you know, you something was taken away from you, and so but you enacted literally the exact same thing that you probably learned from years and years as, you know, failing in certain ways where you just gain resilience. And there's it is in the Bible, but it's just like this whole idea of like when you have trials of many kinds, like you actually build endurance, you become more resilient. And so when you do have either like major failures or tragedies, and I know this too from like losing my father and honestly going through last year as well, you know, you have this endurance, you have this resilience that really helps you to make it past those times when they do get hard. Because failure can bring hard times. Failure can actually bring like, hey, my business is gone, or
for sure.
And or so there's very similar kind of things happening. And I do think that like resilience is something that grows the more you fail.
Yeah.
And then because there was that kind of, I think, history of you always kind of picking yourself up almost daily, like if you screw up color, you screw up something, and you obviously having to do bigger shows, and like maybe certain failures and trials being pretty big there. By the time you had a major life tragedy, you know, you had that resilience to push through.
There's you brought up the Bible. You brought it up. So there's this scripture.
Hey, glad I did.
There's this scripture though that says, and correct me because I don't know, I might be getting this totally wrong. But there's a righteous man that falls down 7 times but gets up 8, or that it's a righteous man that falls down 7 times but he gets up 8. And that's crazy relevant because I just feel like it's like anyone can fall down 7 times.
Right.
But not everyone gets up 8 times. You know what I mean?
Well, they
like
also got up the second time. They got up after the third time.
Exactly.
They got up after the third, you know.
We're not exempt.
Right.
We're not exempt. We are all in this together.
Well,
we all will experience that.
Right. But it's almost like they had resilience enough to get to 8 to 7 times.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So
true.
like
You could take
there's
it
also
that way
something
for
to take a look at, that like you can even have like resilience, but then you eventually can get worn down and you're like, what's the point?
I'm not getting up again.
Yeah, and I know that you had that experience last year for sure.
Yeah.
You named 3 things.
Sure.
You know, that really, you know, knocked you down. And so you know, you kept getting yourself up. You kept getting yourself up, and then we still keep getting ourselves up. There's still stuff that comes up from that, which is so hard.
But it's so like, it's so beautiful because it's life.
Right.
Like I think like to kind of like when you're thinking about, you know, the getting pummeled and then, you know, being taken out and like all these things and failing, but seeing it as an experiment or seeing it as your kid taking a step for the first time. It's like there's so much just humanity in it. Like all of the things that we're describing, you don't have to be a creative. Like you can be just human. Any human on the planet who's experiencing failure and knows how to embrace it, even if it takes them a while, even if it takes them a lifetime, even if it takes them, you know, like big things or just a bunch of little small things or whatever, failures, getting to the point where you can embrace failure. What's at the other end of that is freedom.
Right.
You're free. You're free from like that fear of risk or change or of what people will think or of falling on your face, of imperfection, of whatever your fear is. You're free from that, you know, because you're just like.
It's the reward for sure of you pushing through it. But there's one thing that you did mention that I want to say. And I think a way to help you through times of failure is perspective. And not getting so tunnel visioned with like what you're doing and realizing like, okay, maybe there's like a little bit of failure there. Maybe there's a little bit of this in my life, but like holistically, there's, you know, maybe some other things to look at that aren't so bad.
Aww.
And so I think that, cause you kind of mentioned, you know, what you mentioned was perspective. Like, remember that things aren't all so bad. So I think that like that brought up to me that a way to combat some of that failure is like to just maintain perspective and to really know, yes, gratitude, to really know that like, hey, like it really isn't that big of a deal. And if we're talking about, failing as artists and stuff like that, it's really not that
it's okay
life ending, necessarily. And then,
For sure.
but as a personal, like outside of being an artist, when life stuff comes at you, and which it inevitably does and will, that's just how life is.
Yeah.
Maintaining an attitude of gratitude and like a perspective really will help you kind of get through those storms, those years, or those moments where you feel like, oh my gosh, I have nothing left to give. You got knocked down 7 times. I don't know if I'm going to get up again. Maybe a little perspective and a little gratitude can get you up that 8th time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, the perspective of like, yeah, it's not going to kill you. Like you were saying, like, hey, like, a little bit of failure as an artist, it's not going to kill you, even though it feels like death. But what is death is dead art. There is a death that happens if you fear failure.
Right.
And you don't get it out, So it's like, no, you're not going to die if you put it out and you're a little embarrassed. It's not that great. Even if it sucks, like you have to go through that process as an artist. You have to experiment. You have to play. You have to, and so if you're suffocated, if that's suffocated out of you from this like fear of failure, the thing that dies is the very thing that you're trying to protect, which is your art.
That's the craziest thing.
Crazy.
And I think
there's a death for sure.
I know. And we have to remember
Yeah.
that it could die and that
Sure.
it will be moved on.
Yeah.
You will be forced to move on.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so important to, and this is something that I want anyone who's listening who's younger.
Yeah.
Or if you are older and younger people who are creative and who are just starting out on their creative journeys,
or you're older,
just to literally be like, dude, you might suck right now, but who cares? Keep going.
Yeah.
And I see so many people, because there's not very many people doing what we're doing still, like in our late 30s. They've kind of been wiped out because they're like, I just feel like I failed too many times. I can't get up that 8th time.
Yeah, what? It gets worse as you get older.
Yeah. Well, the stakes get higher, the responsibilities get bigger. When you're younger, you really have this magical time to literally just fail all day. Go for it. Just fail. And then, learn. But, fail in a way where you're failing forward, where you're getting that feedback, where you're experimenting.
For
you're
sure.
not getting stuck as
I'm just saying I love that you're speaking to the younger generation.
Okay. I'm going to segue into speaking people that are older, because then that's kind of the part that I think.
Like, write your book.
Yes.
Yes. There. Yes. I feel like the stakes are even higher when you're older of just being robbed, because it's like, if you are still afraid of failing when you're older and you have the perspective of life is short, there's nothing to lose. Like, I'm just going to go for it. And then you don't maintain that perspective, and you have this fear of failure when you're older, so that you don't do things.
Right.
Like, to me, like, I think it just becomes even sad.
Well, that's like
it's a true tragedy.
Right. And when the stakes are higher, the probability of you failing and quitting and giving up is higher. But if you can push through it, like, you have so much more to offer because you have so much more experience. I mean, 100%. Sometimes like I feel like when we're doing this podcast, like, what do we really have to offer? And I think, well, who cares? That's already like a lie. Every single individual has something to offer this world. And 100%. I think everyone has a perspective. You've gone through your life and you've gone through all the hard times. I can, in my mind, start thinking of friends who I know have so much to offer that don't think that they have anything to offer.
100%.
And they're crippled by that alone. Mm-hmm. They just have some lie they bought into. And it's just like, and the older you get, it's like, okay, the stakes can be so much higher, but it's kind of just in your own mind.
Totally.
It's like, put it out.
It's not that.
Who cares?
Not that big a deal.
And what do you know? Like, think about when you see someone put something out.
Yeah.
Like that is like I'm thinking about, you know, someone that put something out that like, you know, I know is a little outside their comfort zone. I'm so stoked.
Exactly.
And everyone else is. Everyone's like, heck yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Keep going. More. And then it stops. Because it's like all that mustering just to put out that one thing. But that's where, okay, you have something to say.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
But I just feel like that's, you know, there's the younger creative and then there's the older creative. And how cool would it be if we normalized
yeah.
older people, and you don't have to just be creative. It doesn't matter about being creative, but older creatives like using their talents, using their heart, using even that angst from like, oh, I kind of gave up a little bit, or like I failed a little bit like that. And then like creating at that point, from that point, starting over. Let's normalize starting your artistic career over if you gave it up in your 40s, in your 50s, in your 60s. Who cares?
Yeah.
You're put here to do this kind of stuff.
100%. What an old school mentality it is that like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, just that you have to be, you have to be this, you have to be that, you have to look a certain way. There is always that pressure, but it's funny because it's like the art isn't as good. It's like, okay, it's kind of cheesy. Like things should be a little off. Things should have a little humanity in them. Like when you look at AI, like, yes, it's really good and you can't tell what's real anymore, but truly like some of it's just so freaking cheesy and so lifeless and so lame. And it's like what you might view as failure
is the answer to this.
Could be a complete success.
Right.
It could be what we need.
Right.
It could be what encourages somebody else or even just moves you on to your next thing or is electricity.
Right.
Right.
It's like a spark. Okay. So, creativity and like doing your courage and putting it out there and going for it. Okay. Is like it's like oxygen for, people who are like, dying of need oxygen. So your little bit of oxygen gives people a little bit of extra breath, you know, to keep going. And the more people that are actually like breathing and like doing this stuff, it's kind of a weird analogy. I need to almost think of a different one, but it's like a spark. I was trying not to use spark because of the
Los
fires
Angeles.
that are happening.
No.
But yeah, maybe spark is a better one. It's just like the spark fans into flame and it just like kind of starts to spread more and more. But if you didn't spark, if you didn't do your part, you know, things will stay cold. Things will stay, you know, dry. And you never know who's going to, and this is like, you kind of said this maybe like 20, 30 minutes ago. It's like, you never know who's going to see it. You never know when you create something, who it's for. We always think it's like for ourselves or something like that.
Right.
But like what you're creating might be something for someone else.
Yeah.
And it might lead you down these roads. Like for me in my life, I feel like all of this kind of like breaking free of, you know, past insecurities and stuff like that is all leading towards a greater confidence to now like starting to write this Analog Sunday book. Like, I don't think a few years ago I would have felt like, I would have given into probably those initial like insecurities, like who wants to read this? And now I'm like, I'm so passionate about this. Yeah. I feel like God gave me this incredible gift that is like Analog Sunday.
Yeah.
And like, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Like, let's just throw it. Who cares? You know?
Love it.
And even if, and I literally could care less if no one ever even reads it.
Sure.
But I feel like there is going to be at least one person who does.
Totally.
I believe it'll be a lot more, but I know there will be at least one person, and maybe I'll never meet them, who reads this book.
Yeah.
And
life changing.
That starts I hate to use the fire analogy right now. It feels very awkward, but truly that's the spark. And so that's just my own personal journey, and how many people out there have the same thing. And I know you have so much art still in you to do. And I know like you are so you're visible in the sense of like all the stuff you do as a hairstylist, but there's so much more that I know you're already starting to tap into in our, you know, in our life and in our life out here in Pittsburgh, where like that's the more that's starting to spread.
Yeah, thank
and
you.
that's the exciting thing.
Yeah.
And it really does compound on itself. You
Sure.
really do get used to failure.
Yeah.
You stop caring what people think.
Yep.
And you start running towards, and it's just like a domino effect. You start to run towards that failure. You want to fail faster.
Yes.
And what was it? We've even said this multiple times. Who was it on getting interviewed at the Grammys or something? SZA? I don't know if it was SZA. Somebody. You sent it to me. I don't think it was SZA. Someone else.
I think it was Salma Hayek. Was it?
No, it wasn't Salma Hayek.
But there was
It was an artist
something-
we didn't really know. And like, you're just like, it was like a young up and coming artist. And they're like, what advice do you have for the younger generation? And like, fail faster.
Oh, yeah.
Fail as fast as you can. And I think that's it's truly some of the greatest advice you can be
Really
given.
quick. Yeah. Salma Hayek said, she said, and I'm sure you've seen it, it went viral, but she was just like, that's my mistake. That mistake that I made, that's mine. You can't have it. That's mine. Mine to learn from, mine to grow from. I own my mistakes. I love my mistakes. My mistakes are mine. So thank you. Like, like it's like, just get a little bit of that on you, like that kind of confidence.
A little Salma Hayek on us.
We all need a little Salma Hayek for sure. And it's like, I feel like from the beginning, if we take it full circle to watching your baby trying so hard to walk, but they keep falling and falling and falling. And then all of a sudden they take their first step. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, there will be always internet trolls. There will always be people out there, naysayers, whatever, even if it's in your own family, even if it's in your own thoughts, that will always exist. But you've got to start packaging that up, putting it away into the void, and then just look at yourself as that baby and be like, at least I took a first step,
Right.
and it's okay. It's okay. We've got this one life. These are your failures just for you.
Yes. How many times would you give your encouragement to someone else? So you might be struggling with failure. You might be struggling with all this. You might be crippled with insecurity.
Sure.
And then someone next to you is like, that you care about, is saying, I want to do this. Like, you're the first, you probably are the first person to be like, you have to go.
Go for it.
You have to go.
You got
Don't care what
this.
people think, even though you're crippled by it.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're back here in the room I'm
about,
not going to post this.
Right.
People are going to think this or that.
So like, imagine that's the same perspective as like a parent for their child.
Right.
It's like you see someone who is starting out, who is learning things for the first time, and it doesn't even matter to you. You are just stoked that they're taking that first step.
That's what you need to do.
Step.
That's where you need to go. That's who you need to be. We definitely believe in you. There's a reason
Make eye contact with the camera.
There's a reason we made Creative Harmony Podcast, and it is in part specifically for this reason. Do not shy away from making your art, and you don't know, in the end, you're just robbing yourself or you're robbing somebody else.
Yeah.
So please,
you're definitely robbing yourself.
Fail faster and embrace your mistakes because they're yours. Own those mistakes. They belong to you.
That's right.
They're your little lessons.
Everyone needs a little Latin kind of attitude with that. A little Salma Hayek,
Everybody.
like whatever. I love it. And I do think that that's the truth. You are definitely robbing yourself. And you are most likely robbing somebody else of something incredible. So just have courage, be free, create, don't stop create freely create. And we'll leave it at that and fail as fast as you possibly can.
Yeah, Fail is my middle name and I'm proud of it.
Fails.
Failure.
My last name and middle name.
And first name.
First name.
And let's go fail.
Let's fail.
Let's go.